Welcome back. So it's time to do another news of the week episode, and as we are now just 2 weeks away from the season begin, I'm gonna start pretty much doing my news of the week only once a week, and we're pretty much now starting to get to a point where there's really no point of me doing another news of the week during the weekends now that there are more preseason game that is going to be taking place, and then in a couple of weeks there's going to be pretty much games that's going to be happening on the weekend pretty much every single week. And whenever there's tends to be games that is going to be happening, whether it's regular season game or preseason game happening on the weekend, usually we don't get a lot of news that I really need to kind of talk about in this news of the week, and that the only news during the weekend's action is just talk about those preseason game that was taking place. But that being said, the first big news I want to talk about is that if you actually realize back on Tuesday, and when you log into the MLSsoccer.com, you realize that the league decided to do a complete redesign of their website, and that I think this is the first time in over 5 years since they have done a redesign to their website. And I know there's a lot of people that have mixed reaction in terms of this new redesign, and in my opinion I also have kind of a mixed reaction in terms of this redesign, because on one hand I think this redesign is good in a way where it's more mobile friendly, and that if you actually look on the league website through your mobile phones, or you don't decide to go into the apps to basically search any MLS information through your phone, then it's definitely much better compared to previous kind of design where it was definitely not mobile friendly if you decided to look at the league website through your mobile phone. And the other thing that I do like about this new redesign is that they actually put a lot of stats number on the new design website. So they actually talk about top assist leader, top goal scoring leader, even talk about top expectancy in terms of, or top expectancy goal in terms of teams, and also talk about who has the most tackle throughout a season. And because of the fact that they started to put those stats number on the main menu, I might actually now think about doing some video throughout this regular season that's going to be stats focused. I always want to do a video on this channel talking about stats and talk about who of course is the top goal scorer of the league and who actually contribute the most in terms of the assist number. But the issue with that is that it's kind of complicated, where I have to kind of go to the stats, and then they have like a lot of complicated kind of stats number to kind of get to the point where I can find who is actually the top goal scorer and the top assist leader. Whereas for this one, it's a less hassle, so in that I can just literally look at the main menu, just kind of scroll down a little bit and look at all the stats number throughout the regular season. Now, the thing that I don't like about this new redesign is that, if you don't actually use it with your mobile, or if you actually look on this website on your computer or on your desktop, yeah, it feels a little bit bulky. And that especially whenever I do my news of the week video, and whenever I search news on the league website, I like the old way where all the news are kind of like on kind of one specific part of the page, whereas the new design basically it's kind of spring all around and kind of looks very bulky. And that I also realized when I actually click more news in terms of this new design, it actually doesn't show some of the news that have already mentioned when they first feature once I click on the new news tab. And that it seems like when I click more news, that's pretty much just only show some of the older news that has happened around the league. But other than that, it does feel a little bit more bulky, and it also doesn't tell you like the date of those news. So now that I literally had to click on the news to see what exactly is the date of this news, because I don't want to get to a point where I might have to kind of report some news that I've already kind of mentioned before. Although in some way I probably could tell that once I basically look at the news headline, and that seems like it's something similar that I basically talked about last week in my last news of the week episode. And then the other thing that I don't like about this new redesign, besides the little bit bulky, is that at the top of the website there's this weird kind of black kind of thing on the top of the website, and that's used to be the part where all the logos of every single team is on top of it. Now, I'm assuming they're probably working on it and putting all those teams' logo on the top of the of that black strip, because if they're not going to do that, that just looks very strange. The fact that that kind of black stripes is happening right on the top of the design. But I'm assuming eventually they are going to do that, and eventually I hope they're going to do what they did with the old design, where at the top of the west side you can see all the team's logo, and if you actually click on one of those logo, it actually goes to the team that you basically click the logo on at the top of the league website. Now, moving on, in terms of the next news, involved the US Open Cup, which will now only feature 16 teams after the Open Cup committee have announced that they are going to be abandoning the opening rounds due to COVID concern. So basically now we're going to, originally we were supposed to have 24 teams that enter in this competition. Now there's going to be 16 teams, and although there's going to be 8 teams remain in this competition, just like it was announced before, there's now only going to be 4 USL team and only 1 team that's going to be coming from the USL League 1, and then I believe the 3 other team is going to be either from USL League 2, UPSL, or the NPSL level. And it's such a shame that when I look at this new format that they're going in, yeah, it is pretty clear that this US Open Cup is probably going to be won by an MLS team, and we're probably going to see a lot of MLS matchup in the latter round. Like, one of the things that I love about the original format is that I feel like there's more of these lower league team gets a chance to potentially advance further into the Open Cup, and that we could have a scenario where it could be like a USL League 1 or even a League 2 team, or even somewhere in the NPSL and UPSL kind of level, where they of course face an MLS team in the US Open Cup. But now with this new format, it seems like most likely, unless if there are going to be some team that is not from the USL Championship or MLS that is going to make a deep run, most likely we are going to see an all MLS matchup in the latter round of this US Open Cup. And maybe if we get lucky, we might see, when we get to maybe the semifinal, where we have a USL Championship versus an MLS matchup, which that's not really a bad kind of matchup for the Open Cup, but we've seen that before happen. I always want to see what happened when a League 1 or even a League 2 or even some of these lower league team play against an MLS team in the latter round. So yeah, it's such a shame that of course is the case, but I guess the reason why that is the case is because of the COVID concern, and they couldn't really kind of get this competition ready before it's supposed to happen. And I can understand why now people are saying that the Open Cup is basically like a crapshoot, and that I have a feeling whoever wins this edition of the Open Cup is probably going to get a big asterisk. And oh, by the way, another thing that I didn't mention about the Open Cup for this season is that for MLS team, the way that they determine it is that they're going to determine the 8 MLS team that's going to enter this US Open Cup based on the first 3 games that they of course play, and those 3 games will be basically all the way to around, I believe, May 2nd of the regular season. And again, I think that's another reason why I can see why a lot of people are saying this feels like a gimmick, because yeah, it's very strange the fact that you determine the qualification of these 8 MLS teams in this year's edition of the Open Cup just based on the first 3 games. And in some way, this can be kind of unfair for some teams, because maybe some teams, their first 3 game might be a very tough start, and they might have to play against tough opponent, or maybe their first couple of games they have to start majority of those games on the road. And then I have a feeling most likely those teams in the CONCACAF Champions League, yeah, they're probably going to look at those first 3 games and they're going to say, yeah, we're not going to be even when trying to win those games, because we know we already have a congested schedule. And if we're going to add Open Cup in terms of what already is a congested schedule for us, that's a big no. I mean, so I don't know if that's going, well, I wouldn't say I don't know, but something tells me it's going to really affect in terms of the competition in the first couple of weeks, where we're going to definitely see some team that maybe they're not going to try very hard, and they're going to try to maybe I wouldn't say they want to lose on purpose, but they're going to try to avoid to go into the US Open Cup in case if they do have a congested schedule heading into May and June. And also the fact that, talk about those CONCACAF Champions League team, they definitely want to avoid the U.S. Open Cup with the way that the U.S. Open Cup is going to be taking place in May and June. Now, moving on, in terms of the next news, is that the Seattle Sounders named Craig Waibel as their new sporting director, and I think this is a good replacement for the Sounders to replace Chris Henderson, that unfortunately decided to leave to go to Inter Miami. And I thought Craig Waibel, during his time with RSL, he was definitely considered one of the better GM and sporting director in the league, and the way that he's been able to get this RSL team repeatedly into the playoffs, despite the fact that he's been kind of work on a shoestring budget, just to show how good he is. And that, again, I think this is a good replacement that the Sounders, of course, just got, and especially now that he is able to have more money to basically build this team. I wonder how he's going to do so. And also, maybe he can work on this Sounders Academy, where, you know, the Sounders Academy hasn't really been considered hasn't always been considered one of the better academy. Well, the reason why is because they usually don't produce a lot of good players out of their academy. Well, with Waibel, we know what he did with the RSL Academy, and really turned that academy to be one of the best one in the league. I wonder if he's going to do the same thing with the Seattle Sounders. And also, it was kind of unfortunate that he had to leave RSL because of the whole Deloy Hansen situation, and the whole thing that kind of is the reason why RSL is in the situation and in the mess that they're in right now, where they're still searching for a new owner and also a new sporting director. Now, moving on, in terms of the next news, is that DC United has terminated Paul Ariola loan to Swansea City after apparently he has suffered a quad injury. And yeah, Paul Ariola become the latest American that unfortunately kind of bite the dust in terms of going to Swansea City, and then things kind of didn't work so well. And, you know, the quad injury that he suffered, by the way, apparently they said that it's going to be around a 6-week injury that he is going, or a 6-week kind of timetable for him to come back. So, you know, the good news for DC is that at least they're going to get Paul Ariola back, but the bad news is they're probably not going to get him, at least in the beginning of the season. And even more bad news is that, you know, Paul Ariola, for these past couple of seasons, he's been suffering a lot of injuries during this time. And, you know, you just wonder, when a player suffers so many injuries for the past couple of seasons, there's definitely going to be some concern about whether or not, if Ariola, even with him going back to DC United, and once again going to be a very important player for that DC attack, is he going to be able to stay healthy to be able to play with this team throughout the entire part of the season? But as I mentioned, the fact that, you know, he's another player that kind of bites the dust with Swansea City. We know what happened with the Jordan Morris situation, where unfortunately he suffered a torn ACL with Swansea City. And then talking about another person that is not a player but more like a coach that kind of bites the dust with Swansea City. And it seems like there's kind of this curse with Americans going to Swansea City and things are not going to work well. Remember when Bob Bradley went to Swansea City and basically coached this team when Swansea was still in the Premier League? Yeah, that did not go so well whatsoever. And I have a feeling that from now on, you know, with maybe future coaches or players that might want to go loan to Europe, they're probably going to stay away from Swansea City, knowing how things have gone throughout the last couple of years. And I'm not saying that this is kind of feels like a real curse that it has with either players or coaches going to Swansea City and things are not going to work well, but the pattern is kind of showed that, you know, if you do go to that club, something bad is probably going to happen with you. But, you know, for Paul Ariola, again, I hope he does have a good speedy recovery and able to get back to this DC team, because, you know, as I mentioned, he is probably the most important player on this attack for DC, and that I think DC is going to be thankful for the fact that they are able to get him back, because there was definitely a sign that I thought he was probably not going to be coming back to DC United even after this loan with Swansea City is over. Now, the Philadelphia Union have signed German-American Leon Fleck from St. Pauli, and this feels like a very Union kind of signing, knowing the fact that this club for the past couple of seasons has been bringing a lot of young talent from their academy, but now they're also bringing some young talent overseas. And Leon Fleck is a guy that he's currently 20 years old, and that, you know, he, even though he did get some minutes with St. Pauli and also get some minutes in the 4th division of Germany, I think you can clearly see he wants to maybe think about getting some more regular minutes as a starter for a team. And although I'm not quite sure with him going to the Union, is that going to be a way for him to get starting minutes, because there are some competition in terms of the midfield of this Union team, and he's going to be really competing for not only the guys that is currently in the roster in that midfield, but also guys that is going to be coming out of the Union Academy that's going to play in the midfield for this team. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not if he is going to get regular minutes, and whether or not if him going to the Union, which is a club that have, at least for the past 2 seasons, have a history of developing good young talent and able to sell them off of a profit once they sell them off to Europe. We'll see whether or not if that is going to be the case. Speaking of 20-year-old, FC Cincinnati also acquired a 20-year-old as they acquired Ghanaian winger Isaac Ntinga from the Danish league. And I originally was going to put the club that he of course used to play before he's now part of FC Cincinnati. But as you probably know, with my pronunciation of Danish club, and especially any clubs in Scandinavia, you know I'm gonna completely butcher their name, and at times I'm not even going to try to spend my effort to try to pronouncing it. But this is a kid that, as I mentioned, he's 20 years old, and from what I heard, he's a very speedy kind of winger that can also score some goals for this team. And I think that profile kind of fits what FC Cincinnati really needs in terms of their wingers, and just ideally what a wingers need to be, where you want to get a winger that is very speedy and able to really rip apart defense and fullbacks on the flank area. Now, I don't know a lot about his distribution and whether or not if he can actually produce some good ball or good crosses just from the flank area, but we shall see whether or not if that is going to be the case. And that, again, I have heard a lot of promising things that is said about this kid, and that I think FC Cincinnati might have got a good young player on their disposal, and a guy that they might be using to continue to trying to hopefully get this attack much better compared to what it has been for the past 2 seasons in the league. Now, DC United have signed for Nigel Roberta from Bulgarian side PFC Levitsky Sofia. Now, unlike the previous two signings of the fact that I heard about where they of course come from in the scouting reports, I actually have no idea who this guy is, and I didn't really hear any scouting reports of how good he is with DC. But one thing I did hear is that it seemed like DC has been trying to sign this guy throughout the entire offseason, and if they are looking to pursue him throughout the entire offseason and finally able to acquire him, he must be a really good player. And especially with DC, I know I said before that it seemed like their forward depth is actually better than what I originally thought it is. The problem with that forward depth is that there's not a lot of quality in terms of that forward group. Like, the only player that I can maybe say that could be a quality starting striker for DC United might be Ola Kamara, but even then, Kamara really suffered a huge decline last season, and you don't know whether or not if he's going to continue to come back to be their leading number 9 and continue to produce a goal for this team. So it's no wonder why DC is really looking to trying to find maybe a replacement for him, and that we'll see whether or not if Nigel Roberta is going to be that kind of player. Now, NYCFC is report in negotiation with Fortuna Düsseldorf for U.S. international midfielder Alfredo Morales. And also, by the way, we're now getting to the part where we're going to talk about some of the transfer rumors that has happened and some of the reports that has happened in the past couple of days. Now, apparently, this is a guy that he is actually a veteran, and he's kind of now in his early 30s that NYCFC is trying to get, and he's also playing in the defensive midfield position. And with him playing in the defensive midfield position, this is kind of another kind of reports and a potential signing that NYCFC get is one that I just don't understand why they need to have another player that plays in that holding midfield or even in the defensive area. As I heard, he is a very versatile player in their team, because when I look at this team, I know this team is a team that definitely have a lot of hole in their squad, but most of that hole is definitely on the attacking end. And the fact that they really didn't do anything on the attacking end, and especially even think about potentially finding a replacement for Maxi Morales, yeah, it does make me a little bit concerned about this team, and that even though they are now starting to get some signings done after that's been something that they haven't done throughout the entire offseason, and their fans were kind of getting very angry at City Football Group of the way that they've been very quiet throughout this offseason, and that they also have been doing more shipping off their core than rather actually replacing them. Yeah, I can understand why NYCFC fans might not be that excited. The fact that, signing a guy that is going to be playing the defensive midfield spot or even in the defense in terms of his versatility is something that this team really needs, because again, I think this defense and this back line is very, very good alongside with this holding midfield that has depth. What is a spot that they do not have depth is on that attacking end. Now, Richie Larrea is reported to be drawing interest with Besiktas, and you know how I talk about Richie Larrea, a guy that he has been such a great player for Toronto, and he is definitely an up-and-coming kind of player for this TFC team. Well, I actually checked to see how old exactly Richie Larrea is, and I was shocked to see that he's actually now 26 years old. Like, I thought Richie Larrea was maybe still in his early 20s, and eventually, when TFC does develop him to be a good enough player, they would sell him off to Europe. But now, in the way that since he's now 26 years old, this is kind of right around that time where this is kind of I wouldn't say almost last chance for any Canadian or American player to make the jump to Europe, but it's kind of also approaching that point. And if you're TFC, depending on what kind of offer Besiktas is going to give to TFC in order to get Richie Larrea, I'm not so sure that they want to let go of him, consider he is definitely one of their more important players, especially in the fullback position. So yeah, this will be very interesting to see whether or not if Besiktas does decided to offer a big sum of money to TFC, and whether or not if TFC is going to accept it. And also, if you're Richie Larrea, this might be a chance for you to actually finally make your dream move to go to Europe. And especially, I think the reason why he wants to go to Besiktas is that Kyle Larin is currently a Besiktas player, and I heard Kyle Larin and Richie Larrea is actually best friends, and I have a feeling maybe Kyle Larin might have actually told Richie Larrea of his time with Besiktas, and that he's definitely having a good time there, and maybe this is the reason why Richie Larrea is thinking about potentially going to Turkey and join his friend Kyle Larin at Besiktas. But again, we shall see whether or not if TFC is going to think about selling one of their best player in their team to a European opponent. Now, moving on to the next news is that Brazilian giant Palmeiras and Grêmio is reported to be interested with LAFC midfielder Etwa Atuesta. I don't know why it said Atwa, but it's Etwa Atuesta. Kind of a little bit of a tongue twister in his name. But, for this is also another one that, if Palmeiras and Grêmio is going to offer a big sum of money to LAFC in order to acquire Atuesta, we shall see whether or not if LAFC is going to do so, because Atuesta no doubt is one, if not the most important player. And then I thought last season, when Atuesta is not in the starting 11 in this LAFC team, you can see how bad that defense got, and that when he is in this starting 11, he definitely holds the line and at least make that defense a little bit more stable from last season. So yeah, this is another a situation where when a team does have a player that is very important to their team, but there are some big clubs which, even though these are not two European club I mentioned, these are two huge Brazilian club that definitely has the money to able to splash to MLS team in order to acquire one of their player. It would be interesting to see whether or not if the price is right, whether or not if LAFC is going to sell him, or if LAFC think that he's just too important, that even though if Palmeiras and Grêmio is going to offer LAFC like $20 million or $15 million for Atuesta, LAFC is not going to budge, because they know that he is really the keystone in terms of their team and especially their defense. Now, moving on into now moving away to talk about transfer reports and signings, to unfortunately now talk about some COVID related news. And for the past couple of episodes, you realize that I haven't really talked a lot about COVID news because I'm kind of getting a little bit tired, of course, talk about COVID news, especially the fact that last season I have talked a lot about COVID news and talked about a lot of times where one of these games is being canceled or postponed to another date because of COVID related issue. Well, since now preseason is underway again, and also as we approach the regular season, don't be surprised we are going to unfortunately have to go back to me have to talk about this issue with some of these games that are going to be canceled or postponed due to COVID situation. Well, in this case, we got two teams that decided to cancel some of their games, and one team actually decided to cancel pretty much all their preseason game for the remaining of time. And that team, of course, is Inter Miami, that decided that they're going to cancel all three of their remaining preseason fixture due to COVID concern. And this kind of all started, I think, in that game against Miami FC where they were supposed to play against them. But then I think it was either one of the Miami FC staff member or players or from Inter Miami that unfortunately got tested positive for COVID, and therefore they basically decided to cancel that preseason. And I think maybe Inter Miami felt like, yeah, let's try not to just risk playing these preseason game, and then we're going to have players that's going to test positive for COVID before the season begin. Let's just basically cancel all of their game. And in some way, this I don't think this is a bad thing that clubs are decided to do, where they know how risky it is to play these preseason fixture, and that if one of these players that of course maybe get tested positive for COVID, they could potentially be out for a couple of days or even a couple of weeks. And especially leading into the season, if there's a player that get tested positive, yeah, he might not even be ready for the first game of the season. Now, that being said, the negative in terms of what Inter Miami is doing here is that they basically are going to be very rusty when they head into their first game. Like, one of the reasons why there's still preseason fixture that is happening even during this COVID era is a lot of these teams still want to get themselves back to match fitness. And the fact that since Inter Miami hasn't played a preseason game all preseason long, this could definitely have some effect in terms of when they're actually playing in a regular season game, where players are probably not going to be match fitness in order to get ready to play these regular season games. Like, you can of course get your fitness up in terms of these preseason training camp, but what really would get players back to match fitness and back to their sharpness is playing these preseason fixture, and not playing them is going to definitely hurt in terms of their chances to really get themselves back to tip-top shape and back to match fitness in the first game of the season. Now, the other club that have canceled their preseason, although unlike Inter Miami, the Dynamo only canceled one of their preseason game, and it's going to be against Austin Bowl. And apparently one of the staff member or players from Austin Bowl was tested positive for COVID-19, and therefore they decided to cancel the game. So in some way, if you're a Dynamo fan, or if you're the Dynamo, the good news is at least there wasn't any of your player or staff member that have been tested positive for COVID-19, but I won't be surprised if the Dynamo is going to go the same route as Inter Miami, thinking that, let's try not to play any of our remaining preseason game in case if there is going to be a situation where we play against a team and that we don't know if that team actually had a player that got tested positive for COVID, and then basically by playing the game, they basically spread it to us, and now things can get really ugly leading up to the start of the season. Now, moving on, in terms of the last two news, is that Adrian Heath has finally confirmed that Ikpara injury is indeed a concussion. And as much as I know this is finally a mystery that, for a very long time, this has been one of the biggest mystery in MLS, where we don't know what happened to Ikpara and what kind of injury that he's been suffering. I did mention before there was some sign that this indeed is a concussion that Ikpara is dealing throughout his entire season with Minnesota last year. And basically now Adrian Heath has finally confirmed that, of course, is the case. And as I said before, for Ikpara, this is a big decision that he has to make for this upcoming season, or even for his career's sake too, because concussion is one of those injury, and probably the injury, that can definitely affect you for the rest of your life. And that I've seen players where they decide to continue to play even though they have concussion problem, and it would, and because of them continue play, they put more risk of making that situation of them having more concussion issue in the future even worse, and therefore it can even affect their rest of their life once their career is over. So, for Ikpara, I think he definitely has to think this very, very hard, and that I really hope that if this concussion is bad enough, or if he thinks that it's just not worth it, the fact that, if he is going to be continue to play, and that he could maybe even worsen the current concussion that he currently has, that it could affect rest of his life, that maybe he would just decide to kind of call it a quit. And again, when Ikpara eventually is going to announce his retirement, I will definitely do a video talk about his career in MLS, and that, Ikpara will always consider as one of the best defender in league history, and unfortunately one of the best defender that had their career cut short because of concussion. Now, finally, in terms of the last news in this news of the week there was a report suggests that MLS will finally list the exact kickoff time along with the broadcast time on its website and app. So this has been something that a lot of people has been complaining about MLS, where whenever the game is listed, like let's say 7 o'clock or 7:30, no, it does not kick off at 7 o'clock and 7:30. It usually is maybe like 8 minutes or 7 minutes after they advertise the kickoff time. And then for national television, there's some times where they advertise the game to kick off 10 minutes later than it was originally advertised. There's times where they say it's 20 minutes, and there's even some extreme cases where it's like 25 minutes from the time that it was advertised, and it really frustrated a lot of people, tuning in for a game only to realize that, oh, there's still 25 minutes before the game actually started, and I literally just got fooled by thinking the game will start now, and now I have to tune into this boring pre-game show. So I think this will definitely fix the issue where, now fans would actually know what time the game, of course, is going to kick off. Like, for me, I always knew that when games that are not national televised, they're usually going to kick off about 7 or 8 minutes, because that's always kind of the case for every games, and also for a person that's been pretty much watching as much MLS game as possible, and for the past couple of seasons, I started to get the pattern that most of these games usually kick off 7 and 8 minutes past their original advertising time whenever it's a regional kind of broadcast game. But for a national broadcast game, that's when it really is a bit of a mystery, because I know sometimes FS1 and Fox might put games like 25 minutes past their advertising time. Sometimes they do it 10 minutes, and that goes the same with ESPN2 and ABC, where they basically do the same thing. So yeah, hopefully they are going to list those time eventually, where now fans would actually know when is exactly the time that they should basically be tuning in for these games. But yeah, either way, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash that subscribe button. Again, I know this has been a relatively long news of the week episode, but in case if I didn't mention any news that you want me to talk about here on the board throughout this long news of the week episode, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.